Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back. Brandon again here in the garage, and I'm moving on up in this world. Literally, I've moved from the basement to the garage. That's a couple steps up at least one flight. And I want to bring you this video and a series of videos talking about the right rack. In this case, the right rack for me, because I'm transitioning from my basement and selling my Rogue RML 690C, and I want to buy a new rack that's going to better fit this new space. So for that, I'm going to bring you this video series. In this particular video, I'm just going to talk about what some of the requirements or what particular I'm looking for, and give you basically what I've narrowed it down to. The following videos will be individually looking at each of those decisions, talking about the pros, the cons, what I like, what I don't like, then a video talking about my final decision, and then another follow-up video when the rack actually comes in and it's installed and set up. And spoiler alert, I've already ordered the rack. It's on its way. It should be here in the next couple of days. So I really got to get cracking on these videos. So for this space, it's a little bit different than my previous one. Number one, obviously, it's in a different location, meaning from the basement to the garage. With the garage means I have higher ceiling heights for the most part, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm also renting this space versus owning my previous house, which I could really do whatever I want. Not that I really did anything I ever wanted, because everyone told me I needed to drywall the walls and put covering over the insulation. I threw up some banners and some other stuff as well, and it really worked out well for me. But for this particular space, I can't do certain things like bolt things to the ground if I wanted to, really worry about the aesthetics too much. I mentioned in my previous videos that I wasn't even sure I was going to have availability in this space because the people we're renting it from are family friends, and they initially said the garage is off limits, we're going to use it for storage. And as you can still see in the background, there is a lot of stuff being stored here, and there probably will continue to be stuff stored here in the future. In fact, I just had to move a moped outside for this particular video, which hopefully will be going away very soon. But that being said, I'm not going to really worry too much about it. I'm going to work with what I'm given, and given what I'm given, that's going to put certain requirements or things I'm looking for in a new potential rack. So that's one of the things I want to talk about. The other thing I want to talk about is this build that I'm going to be doing for this particular space is going to be a short-term build, meaning that we're going to be renting for probably around a year while our new house is being constructed. And initially I thought I'd just buy something for a year, sell it, and then buy something brand new. So when I first started thinking about what kind of rack would best fit in this space and best fit my budget, I was really looking more on the lower end because I said it's just going to be a year and I'm just going to get it done with, and who really cares what I get. I started to think, however, that once we move into the new house, once it's done, it's number one going to be a big investment anyways to build that new house, buy the land, etc., but also to furnish that house appropriately, buy furniture, appliances, and things outside of a squat rack. It's probably not the best idea to invest a ton of money in a brand new gym when I know how my spending tendencies tend to be. So the rack that I buy right now, ideally is going to last me around 18 months, but I am still going to want to sell it at some point, which also is going to play into my decision-making factor, because although I want something nice because I'm going to be training on it for at least a year and a half or so, and I want to be happy, but I also want to buy something that I'm going to get a good return on my investment for, which I know all too well of what does well and what doesn't, because as you guys recently know, I pretty much sold everything in my old gym outside of the bench I'm sitting on, my deadlift platform frame, and my Iron Master adjustable dumbbells. I sold probably around 8 bars. I've sold combo racks. I've sold other benches. I've sold my competition plates, my bumper plates, a whole bunch of other stuff under the sun. And for some stuff I get great return on, like for instance, my old Rogue Fitness rack for the RML 690C. I bought it for like $1,800 and I sold it for like $1,700 5 years later. So to use that rack for 5 years and last me a very long time and well, only really cost me $100 out of pocket, which is great. And I would love to see that replicated in this new build. So buy something nice that's going to retain its value and get most of my money back. So then again, I can reinvest it into more gym stuff. So those are really my main concerns or wants. But also something that I really wanted to do, again, is not necessarily just go the cheap route, because I really thought about that. I could just get a squat stand. It would be cheap. It would fit in the space very well because it's little to no footprint. But I knew deep down inside I would not be happy training with that. And I'm given this opportunity not that often, meaning a complete refresh of a gym. I'm only going to run into that so many times, at least that my wife will support me on. So for this case, I really wanted to make sure that I went with 1-inch hardware for whatever I chose. Now that being said, a lot of the 1-inch hardware stuff that you see out there is for big beefy racks. And because of that reason, most of what I'm going to be looking at, I've narrowed it down to a half rack setup. And if you're not familiar with half racks, you are probably have seen them if you've watched this channel for any length of time, because I used to train at the last gym that I was consistently going to. But half racks are basically racks that you do work outside of, but they include things oftentimes like plate storage, which is nice. And again, they take up a minimal footprint, but they can be very functional in a sense. So that being said, I narrowed it down to 3 main half racks that I wanted to look at for this series of videos to be into consideration for my next rack. Number 1 is the new Rep Fitness HR 5000, which I've seen nothing but good reviews on for the most part. In fact, Coop from Garage Gym Reviews just did an overall review of that rack and call it the best imported rack that you can buy. I'll link that in the description box below. I also wanted to take a look at the Sorinex XL half rack, which is something I've had my eye on for a while, being in terms of buying something from Sorinex. When I first did my basement gym build a couple years ago, again, those of you who've been following for any length of time, you'll know that I actually spec'd out a rack, put in my order, but because they were taking so long, over 2 months, I decided to end up canceling it and going with Rogue, which I don't regret, but I have always kind of had that itch to get something from Sorinex. And lastly, I want to take a look at the Rogue Monster Collegiate Half Rack, because Rogue is a brand that I've come to know and love, and some might accuse me of being a Rogue fanboy, but like I said, I had their last rack for 5 years and it was in flawless condition. It's always treated me well, and their Monster Collegiate Half Rack, I would say arguably, is one of the best half racks available on the market. So all 3 of those use 1-inch hole spacing and 1-inch hardware, but one of the things to consider, even though that some of these things are space saving in terms of the footprint they take up, and even though the garage that I'm in here has a ton of vertical space, it's not a consistent vertical space, because number 1, if you take a look around, you see stuff like, for instance, the garage door, when that's open, a typical height rack likely wouldn't fit there. And again, I don't want to cut down on a rack because I don't want to skimp in this case when I have the garage, which has taller ceilings. So for the current time being, I actually have my deadlift platform under where the garage door would be when it's open. Because again, what's the point of training in a garage gym if you can't actually open the door when it's nice out and summer's right around the corner? You'll also notice some other things in the background that are hanging down, so I have to be careful or mindful about the vertical and horizontal footprint that it takes up top. But that being said, there's also a beam in the back that you may or may not be able to see right now, but I'll show it in the video in case you can't. And that beam is roughly about 91 inches in height. And that's a very important beam to me, because when I eventually move back to the basement, chances are my ceiling height is going to be somewhere between 90 inches, give or take 3 to 6 inches on that side. I know what a lot of you are thinking. If you could give or take 3 to 6 inches, you'd all be much, much happier. But again, I want to take that into consideration, because the plan is to eventually move this down into the basement to bridge the gap until I do another build. So I don't want to get something that's 100 inches high that may fit here in the garage, but it won't fit in the basement. So those are kind of my context of what I'm looking for. Again, a half rack with 1-inch hardware that's going to fit my space and also be able to fit in the basement going forward, has high resale value, and is something I'm going to be happy training on. So again, the 3 racks I'll be looking at are the Rep Fitness HR 5000, the Sorinex XL half rack, and the Rogue Fitness Monster Collegiate half rack. So before we go and end this video, let me know in the comment section right now which way you think I went, because as I've already mentioned, I've already bought the rack and it will be here very soon, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. The next couple of videos, like I said, each one will focus on individually that company and their rack, and I'll talk about what I like, what I don't like, and then once I've done that, I'll come back and tell you exactly what my decision was. And then again, finally, I'll show you the actual rack once it's here and built, and I'll talk about what some of my plans are. So as always, thanks for watching. In the meantime, stay big.